came across an interesting story here at IRCE. So when you think about things like service, when you think about things like executional and logistical excellence, things that are important for e-commerce companies, probably one of the organizations that's best known for it is the U.S. Army. And so we're going to have an interesting conversation about that. Hi, I'm Daniel Burstein, Director of Editorial Content at Marketing Sherpa. We are here at the Marketing Sherpa Media Center at IRCE, and joining me now is Joe Peppers, the e-commerce market sector leader for the Weitz Company. Thanks for joining us, Joe.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So Joe, as we talked, you have some interesting experience because you started in the Army and then you went to work for a lot of e-commerce companies. So I want to talk about what you learned from the Army that other e-commerce companies can emulate and how they're serving their customers and their employees. But let's start. Tell me a little bit about your Army service.
Yeah, so graduated from West Point in 2002.
I see the pin right there.
That's right, yeah. 9/11 happened my senior year of school, and I actually lost a friend in 9/11. Oh. And then I did 3 tours in Iraq, and my last tour was actually as economic development in Baghdad. And so it was probably one of the best experiences of my life because I really learned how to serve a community that wasn't even really mine, right? And you think about the things that you're taught at West Point, the duty, honor, country, and the service of your fellow man. For me, that has resonated throughout my career. Transitioned out of the Army in 2010 and spent about 2.5 years at Amazon and almost 2 years at Apple. And then I went to work for a company called Fanatics.com. And so in all of those jobs and those moments where I've worked in corporate America, we've really tried to emphasize, I have, service, not just to the company and trying to make money, but also to my employees that work for me, and then also for our customer. And
let's talk about that. So first of all, thank you for your service.
Yeah, sure.
And so let's talk about, so on the managing employees level, so what rank were you in the military and how many people did you manage and how's that work?
So I was a captain in the Army, my last job, I was a company commander for OCS at Fort Benning, Georgia, and I had about 200 soldiers underneath me.
That's an officer candidacy school?
Officer candidate school, yep.
Okay,
exactly.
Great. And so what did you learn from managing those 200 soldiers under you when you were managing people at Apple and Amazon and Fanatics.com, which is another big e-commerce company?
Well, one thing that's interesting, and Malcolm Gladwell has this book called The Outliers, and in The Outliers he has a section called The Trouble with Geniuses. And he talks about sort of these leaders that are too smart to relate to the everyman, so to speak. And one of the things I have always tried to emphasize is to establish a connection with the people that work for you, and in doing that, you can build synergy and you can build inspiration. And so taking that from the Army and implementing that at Amazon and Apple has been critical to my success.
Okay, especially if you're managing sometimes back-end operations, warehouses.
Oh yeah, for sure.
These people.
It's like the engine room.
Yeah, I mean, it's what powers a company.
Yeah.
And some of the people too could be different from you if you've got more of a business background. So what are some tips? How can you connect? How can you make those connections?
So I'm a big fan of interviewing and really getting to know. So one of the things like I did as a company commander is I would every morning I would force a couple of soldiers to write me a 1-page or a half-page bio, and I would read it, and then I would go talk to them about, hey, you're from Cleveland, or hey, you're from Mount Gilead, Ohio, or wherever it was, and they were like, I can't believe you read that. I thought I was just doing it as a drill. But what it really did is it enforced this building of that intimacy, right? So that they had to be vulnerable to me, and then they knew I could trust them, or that they could trust me to get to know them.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Now, what about when it gets harder what about when things go wrong? What about when it's the Black Friday rush and the products aren't getting out and someone doesn't show up to work on time? How do you handle that?
Well, yeah, so my third deployment in Iraq, we had one of our leaders in the operations center. We actually had to kick him out because he just couldn't handle the pressure if something went wrong, if someone got hurt or injured or whatever. And very much the same way on Amazon during peak, it could get a little hairy. And Fanatics the same thing, Apple the same thing. But one of the things is really poise. Demonstrating poise is incredibly important, not just to obviously your bosses and your company, but also the people that are following you. If you can't demonstrate poise, then you're not going to inspire and motivate folks to follow you. And so it also creates a vulnerability that you can't, that isn't helpful or functional in your leadership.
And people need to trust their leaders.
That's right, yeah.
Okay, so we're talking about your employees. Now let's talk about customers. So you were telling me about how you were serving the people in Iraq. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so it's funny, as an economic development guy, project manager guy, I was sort of like, almost thought of as like a money man. in Baghdad because they're like, oh, he's going to do a project for us. One cool story, so we had a really a bombing in Baghdad, several people, many people killed and injured, and General Odierno was like, hey, listen, we need to make this right. And he gave me $1 million. He was like, I want you to go in the community, I want you to find out where these people are, and I want you to help them. And so what we did is we went out and we made sure that some families had the money to go to a hospital or whatever. Very much the same way at Amazon, whether it's or Apple or Fanatics. Someone gets injured, someone has family problems or whatever it is you want to make sure that you're there and like you respond with action, and that it's not just like a phone call or an email, but you're actually responding. You know, like whether or not I might go to a hospital if someone is injured or whatever it is, but you want to make sure that you're present and you're acting. So also the customer, if they have an issue, I will fly to wherever you are. You know, if I've got one customer at Apple, they were like, hey, they're not going to get this package. I'm like, okay, well, I'll fly there. Send me to Rhode Island. One time at Fanatics, we had a new launch, and it was like, I think it was the Royals jerseys. And I was like, listen, this guy, whoever it is, it was like it might have been a senator or something. I was like, this guy has to have this. And I took one of my managers, I was like, listen, I'm going to pay for a plane ticket. You're going to fly there. You're going to give this guy. And it was like a huge deal that we would send someone out to the customer to make sure they got that product. And so that's what that's one of the bedrocks of me is I will come to you, I will act, and I'll make sure that you get the service you deserve.
So I'm a Mets fan, so I'm not too happy about a Royals fan getting their jersey, but to be clear, so you actually, just to get a jersey, you flew someone out there to hand deliver the jersey?
For sure.
What was the customer's reaction?
There was a little bit, so I think that he got there at midnight, and it's funny that he got there like late at night. There was a handler that was working in between, but I mean, they were just sort of awestruck, and there was just, this is really, like, I can't believe that you went that far to make sure I got a jersey. Like it's not even a big deal. But it is a big deal. It is a big deal. And so if you treat it like a big deal, then they will know that that's the kind of service that you offer.
Yeah, we want to have that delight in our customers.
Yeah, for sure.
So let me ask you in really understanding what our customers want and what they need as opposed to what we want to give them. So I think you mentioned, in Iraq you're working on some water projects or some other projects where you were trying to serve the people of Iraq. So how did you make sure you weren't giving them what we as Americans wanted to give them, but what they as Iraqis needed? Yeah,
so we talked about having a soldier, and part of creating customer intimacy is understanding their pain. And so instead of me trying to sell you a building or sell you whatever I'm selling you, it's really about me talking to you, just like we are now, and asking like, hey, what's the pain point here? What's the constraint? What assumptions should I make? How should we see around corners? Like a lot of times, some service providers, they'll just say, listen, I'm only going to do what's in my contract, and that's it. And they won't even ask you what you need, or they'll think it's too much. And so one of the things that we want to make sure we do is just ask what your pain is. Like what is your pain? What's driving your frustration? And then how can I fit that need, or how can I get you the resources to fit that need?
Okay, and so you would actually, you sit down, you interview the customers,
yeah, for sure.
Trying to sell people.
Because you can create, and I think they talked about in the pre-conference, you can create this sort of value stream or value chain where you can see the path, the flow that the customer is trying to achieve, or whatever it is, and then you can find the constraints, the things that are blocking the customer from achieving success or getting the service that they want. And then you can say, okay, that's the pain point right there. That's the clogged artery, and that's where we want to go after.
That's great. Yeah, map the customer journey. Well, thank you for coming by, Joe.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Again, thank you for the service to our country.
Absolutely,
awesome.
My pleasure.
And thank you for watching. You can see many more videos from IRCE at marketingsherpa.com/IRCE.